Alright guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. And again, Martyn, we're in a different environment today with a special guest. Can you do the honours?
Yeah, it looks a lot neater than where we normally are actually, Jake. But yeah, it's a great pleasure to be in Wigan, and it's an even greater pleasure to introduce Chris Brookes, the chairman of the Wigan Club, who has been the chairman since the 1st of December last year after the previous chairman, Ian Lenigan, retired. Chris, pleasure to see you. Welcome to our podcast, and I'm very certain we're going to have an extremely interesting conversation with you today.
Well, Martyn, Jake, thank you for asking me to be part of this. I mean, I'm really looking forward to it, and the fact that we can talk about many aspects of the game, I think will be something
and
of
your career,
interest.
Of course,
and hopefully that's something of interest to the listeners. So really looking forward to that. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Welcome to Wigan, Jake.
No, it's been great. It's the weather isn't too bad today. The clouds are coming over us here in the background, but it was a nice sunny walk from the train station for myself. So.
And just for people who don't know, we're sat in Chris's office at Robin Park, and immediately out of the window at the back of us there is the Wigan training pitch and the athletics track around it, and lots of sounds of young children. It's a terrific community asset, Chris, isn't it? And, you know, you can't beat hearing the sounds of young kids enjoying themselves and having a great time, you know, running about, doing whatever they're doing out there. It's great, isn't it?
And that's a central bit about our great game, Martyn.
Yeah.
I'm sure something we'll touch on later. But that really deep connection between the game and the community, and how it can really influence positively, just as you've said,
absolutely,
the health and well-being. So that's absolutely massive for us as a club and as a board, and of course for Mike, our new owner.
Yeah, something you should feel very proud of. I'm sure you do, and the game should feel proud as well, because we're going to the benchmark club, or at least one of the benchmark clubs in the game, and it's just wonderful to come here and see so much activity, Jake, isn't it?
Just the level of professionalism as well. You can just tell walking around the hallways, how professional it is here at Wigan, and that's obviously been reflected in the performances on the field as well. So I was just saying earlier, I was here at the Open Media Day at the start of the season, which was a great behind the scenes look, and had a fabulous time, mate. So. Yeah, full credit to Wigan, and thanks for having us again.
Well, let's start by asking Chris a little bit about his own background. Chris, obviously you've had a long journey into ultimately becoming the chairman of Wigan, but you've done many other things before that. And just tell us a little bit about how where you come from, how you first got into rugby league. You actually, of course, had an incredibly eminent career in the medical field. You were, I think, the medical director of a hospital trust that covered Salford and Bury and Rochdale and Oldham. Extremely responsible job, and at the same time you were the chief medical officer for the Rugby Football League. But before that, how did you? What was your life, and how did you actually get into rugby league initially?
Yeah, Martyn, so it's been a long journey, 27 years in rugby league, and really fortunate to have experienced so many highs during the game, and so many opportunities the game has given me. And you mentioned about the NHS, and crikey, I think that I used a lot of the leadership that I learned within rugby league and translated that in me leading within the NHS, and how a team works, the dynamics of the team, the standards that are necessary for real success, as you've mentioned, Jake. So there was certainly synergy and connectivity between those worlds. Well, Martyn, I've been really fortunate in opportunities that have been given to me, and look, I started my medical career actually in dental surgery, and I was very proud of the fact that I qualified in dental surgery.
That was at Liverpool University,
yes,
wasn't it?
Yeah, sure. Probably long ago, longer than I'd care to remember. So that was the end of 1982, beginning of 83.
You did play a bit of rugby, didn't you? The other code was a student, I think, at Liverpool.
Yeah, sure. I was a dreadful player, Martyn. Absolutely terrible.
I can't believe that for a minute.
No coordination whatsoever. However, very, very keen, very, very keen. And I'd like to think I've managed to maintain that keenness around fitness and stuff over the years. Yet, studied dental surgery and then got this job on the jaw and facial team at the Royal Liverpool Hospital. And goodness, that was thrown in at the very deep end, but gained and learned a lot of skills.
So you were a surgeon.
I was an oral surgeon and worked my way up to be a registrar in oral and jaw surgery. And what I learned there has helped me so much. It's helped me so much in Rugby League, but also helped me in my work as a doctor in emergency, because that was my main work really in medicine. The 30 years as a doctor. Almost all of that was in emergency medicine. So those skills, you can imagine, Jake, learning how to assess a facial injury, learning how to deal with some of those because they are relatively unusual, yet perhaps more common in Rugby League as a contact sport.
Yes.
Learning how to stitch.
Yeah.
Again, very fortunate to have gained that experience. And then realising that if I wanted to perhaps take my career forward, I needed to study medicine as well, which I did, again at Liverpool University, still playing rugby union very badly, yet then qualified in both dental surgery and medicine, which I suppose, Martyn, Jake, gave me a really good grounding for having the chance to work in Rugby League and to lead medical teams there.
Actually, I think you, in that role at Liverpool, Chris, you were saying earlier off camera that you did come across one or two Rugby League players for treatment, of course, because, of course, Rugby League, particularly in those days, a lot of players did have facial trauma injuries. And you had to deal with them, and I think you made one or two quite good friendships in doing that.
So I will remember Sean Wayne, walking into our clinic room on a Monday morning,
right,
and explaining that the previous afternoons, what had happened between the afternoon and the morning, goodness only knows, when his jaw was hanging freely, wafting in the breeze.
Crikey.
And so Sean explained there'd been a little bit of an altercation with another player, and there'd been a collision, and he unfortunately had a very badly broken jaw, and that required an immediate operation. And so Sean and I became friends then at that point, and we've been friends since. There was another guy actually beat Sean's record, Jake, because there was a guy called Bernard Dwyer.
Oh, I remember Bernard very well.
Bernard Dwyer, what a lad! He played for the St Helens club and then went on to play for Bradford, and he and I became friends when we were at Bradford together. Anyway, I'll never forget this to Bernard. So we were doing the clinic on a Thursday afternoon, and there was a letter that came through from the St Helens club doctor about this guy Bernard. I thought Bernard has broken his jaw. So how did this happen? Similar to Sean, a bit of an altercation. It was on the Sunday. I said, right. And he said, well, I didn't think it was too bad. So I went training again last night, and it became a bit worse. So I've come today. Right, so you broke your jaw 4 days ago, Bernard. Let's get this right. And you went training. Well, he said it's very important to keep a place in the team. And I said, right, Bernard. Well, unfortunately, Bernard, you won't be playing this Sunday because you need an operation. And so so there's just those two bits. That level of
toughness,
tenacity, determination. some mental toughness there. You know, I'm thinking, crikey, this is one heck of a game.
You probably thought to yourself, I need to get involved here before someone seriously injures themselves and goes undiagnosed.
And Jake, you're right. And through meeting the guys like that, they said, "Oh, yeah, do you want to come and watch some of the games?" And so I'd never watched Rugby League, but I started to watch, and of course, because we were based in around Wiston, where your missus works, and St Helens and South Liverpool, Widnes was the team. So I got to just watch Widnes and was fascinated by it all, really. And got to know some of the players in that regard. You know, Martyn, what I liked about Rugby League was that the rules, it was a very straightforward game. I liked that, so it was easy to understand and grasp and pick up. You know, and I think perhaps we don't make enough of that.
No, compared to the other rugby code.
Yeah, sure, yeah. And I agree with that as well, Martyn, because even though I played rugby union badly, but I played for 15 years, I genuinely don't understand the rules of rugby union at all.
No.
Anyway, Rugby League, straightforward to pick up, but also those qualities that we've all agreed on, how important, and the other bit about it being rooted in the community. That
we've got so much to offer as a sport, haven't we? You know, and we don't shout about it. That's the trouble.
These were the things that attracted me to Rugby League, you know, and I got fascinated about teams and how they worked and the relationships there.
But your first role in Rugby League was actually at Chorley Borough, wasn't it? That when Chorley had a Rugby League club. How did you get there?
So Martyn, I get lots of stick from the lads here for being a big timer, quite rightly. However, you can't start any lower in the game. Respectfully to everybody, it wasn't Chorley first team; it was Chorley Academy.
Yeah.
So you're right at the bottom of the pile, and somebody who my wife knew, called Dr. Barry Miller. He was a long-standing doctor in the game in Rugby League, worked with the Salford club. He'd heard that I liked rugby and said, "Oh, yeah, would you fancy having a go with Chorley?" And they need a doctor. And I went along, Jake, and it's an interesting thing. Why did I keep going back? And I kept going back because the groundsman at Victory Park, Chorley, made a fantastic cup of tea and a warm welcome. and so we said, doc, blah, blah, blah. And I go in, have a cup of tea with this guy. And I'm just thinking, well, this is a really friendly place.
Yes.
And so when Sir Lindsay Hoyle, of course, a big man rooted in Chorley, came to our World Club Challenge, he was fascinated to hear that story about why you got involved in Chorley.
Yeah.
And it was the welcome at the place and Victory Park, that I thought, well, actually, this is something I quite like.
What a shame that club still doesn't exist, actually. It was a friendly little club, and I actually enjoyed that Victory Park Stadium. It was very small and quite compact, obviously, but I enjoyed one or two good games there.
It's still there, and some wonderful gates as well, very ornate iron gates as you go into the place. But what happened actually, Jake and Martyn, was that there was a guy called Kevin Tamati, who was the head coach, and I suppose I'd moved on to do a couple of the first team games, and Salford had then got into the Super League in 1997. And they were in need of a doctor to probably take a more hands-on role, and he recommended me to Salford. And this new role was cemented because one of the Salford directors became very ill and came to the emergency department where I worked. By then I was qualified in medicine as well, and someone had told him that I liked rugby. And so the next thing is I had the chance to work with Salford, and a red letter day for me when, after about halfway through the season, this was 97, I got this chitty, Jake, to go to an outfitters in Manchester to be given a club blazer.
Right.
Now, money was quite tight at Salford,
as it still is. Yeah.
So for Graham McCarthy, the secretary, to give me this chitty to go, you can go and get a blaze, and I was expecting to pay, and actually got it for free. I'm thinking, right, I must be making a little bit of progress.
So that consolidated your position with Salford until Bradford came. And how did you move to Bradford?
So I was really committed to Salford, and I absolutely loved working there. And I saw Nathan McAvoy on Sunday when Wigan played Salford, and we were laughing about our time together there. And what had happened was that I'd been fortunate enough to be appointed to the role as the Great Britain Academy Doctor. And this was in 1998 and then 1999. And through that, when David Waite became the Great Britain head coach, you'll remember David.
Of course,
yeah. You do, Martyn, of course. He said, look, I want a completely new staff here. I don't care about where people are. I just want the best people. And so through an appointment process, I was very lucky to become the Great Britain Rugby League doctor, something I was very proud of. And unfortunately, at the end of 2002, Salford were relegated from the Super League, and it was made pretty clear to me that, look, if you want to keep on being the national team doctor, you can't really do that from then it was called the Northern Four Premiership.
From outside Super League.
Yeah. So Bradford said, would you like to come and work with us? And it suited me. There was a great doctor that I worked with called Roger Brown, and Anna Fitzpatrick. Do you know Anna, who's Carl Fitzpatrick's wife?
Right.
She was the head physio at the time, Anna, and so we all worked together, and it was a great time, really.
Yeah, marvellous.
Yeah.
And Nobby was the coach, of course, wasn't he? Brian Noble.
He was, yeah, and of course that was the link, because he was David Waite's assistant, and then took me to Bradford, and Bernard was there. Bernard Dwyer.
Did he remember you?
Oh, yes. so Bernard was there.
Yeah.
And Bernard was very helpful, because he told the lads that I was all right, and a good lad. And I suppose knowing somebody like Bernard was helpful. And it was an extraordinary time for Bradford.
It was.
I mean, some of the players were absolutely top draw. And there was a bit as well, Jake, that some of those lads had come through the GB Academy. So I was very friendly with Fielden, because we'd come through together. With Paul Deacon, we'd come through together as well. And that helped. And of course, Mike Forshaw, whose picture is there, Forshaw's like a superb wine that, as he gets a bit old, as he got older as a player, he matured and became even more delicate in his ability to turn a game. But it was a fantastic time.
I see just on field, and you got the article there, Willie Mason, on your wall after they had that confrontation, you might say, on the field.
I mean, well, a little bit of background to that. So look, with Martyn, with your blessing, we're fast forward into 2006.
Yes, that's fine.
And Brian was Brian Noble was then the head coach of Great Britain at that stage, and we must loop back to Great Britain, Martyn, because we said about our game and its connection with the community. We said about it's a game which is easy to understand and is really rooted in some great qualities. There's something we're missing as well about the Great Britain brand. We must come back to that.
Yeah.
So, Jake, Great Britain against Australia in 2006 in the Tri-Nations was massive. So, Great Britain, New Zealand and Australia. So we fly down there, and this tour started in Newcastle, and there was a warm-up game between Newcastle, a Newcastle Select, not the Newcastle Knights, a Newcastle Select and a Great Britain Select, and some of the players from the Newcastle team decided that they were going to have a little bit of a go at Jamie Peacock.
Right.
What a leader of men.
Yes.
So I've met some great leaders of men. Andrew Farrell, of course, Jamie Peacock, Sean O'Loughlin, Thomas Lilley, Kevin's, the list goes on. Jamie, best described as no white flag.
Yes.
So Jamie was having none of this at all. Yeah. So that set the tone that the Great Britain team are not going to be pushed around. Anyway, we go to play in Christchurch and got beaten by New Zealand. It was a close game, but we lost. Anyway, we then fly back to Sydney. You will know more about the Sydney press than me. I'm telling you, these guys. I mean, Martyn, it was extraordinary. So Leon, a great friend of mine, again through the GB Academy, Leon and I got very friendly.
Yeah.
And
Leon
Price.
Yeah.
So Leon comes into the hotel in the middle of that week looking a bit sheepish and said, I think I've said something a bit off the wall, Doc. I said, right. What's that about, Leon? He said, I'd rather be in Blackpool than Bondi. Okay. And he said they weren't very pleased. So we were then besieged, literally, Jake, besieged by the Sydney press, followed everywhere. There was a guy, I think he still worked for them, the Sydney Daily Telegraph. That's a newspaper, isn't it? Yeah. It's not like the Daily Telegraph here.
No,
that's more like the Sun, isn't it? This guy was following us. So the scene was set, and then they said, "Well, look, Stuart, you're the enforcer of the team. So why don't we do a bit of a piece between you and the man? You'll have to forgive me. I only know him by a different term. He was a front rower and
Willie Mason.
No, not him. There was another guy. They called him.
Maybe like Steve Price.
No.
I'm trying to think back in 06.
I'll think of his name. He played for Hull FC for a while. This guy and
Mark O'Mealy.
They called him Ogre. Ogre.
Right.
So that's why I couldn't remember his name, because I'm thinking I didn't have to say the word Ogre, but you said it for me, Martyn. So these two are at it in a big, massive spread in the town. I think, oh God. Anyway, so we get to the game. So the game starts, and of course, Stuart and your man Willie Mason are at you. And look, just for those on the podcast, Willie Mason is one of the biggest men I've ever met in my life. He is ginormous. And he's there, and as you will know better than I, Jake, saw himself as the enforcer of that Australian team.
Yes.
And they clashed, and then the next thing is that Fielden's on the ground. This is before all more attention was being paid to head injuries. I don't even think there was a penalty given, to be honest. No. And Stuart, it was obvious that he had suffered some form of concussion following that. And the players, God bless them, they reported to me, look, Stuart's not right. Examined him at half time. I had to say to Brian, Stuart can't return to the field of play. So there was an interesting conversation then, of course. Brian, God bless him, he accepted my clinical judgment that Stuart couldn't return.
Yeah.
But there was then that newspaper cutting, which I think is from the famous Sydney Daily Telegraph, which is a transcript of Willie Mason's defence to the judiciary the following week, and as the podcast viewers won't be able to see it, but it's mostly asterisks and dotted lines and blah blah blah, because let's say Willie didn't hold back, did he, Martyn, in what he was saying about pommies and goodness me.
But the interesting moral of that tale, though, is that controversy sells, doesn't it? When Leon made that comment, it sort of created a laser-like focus on the game that was going to take place a few days later, which is no bad thing, because obviously, we all want to generate lots of publicity for rugby league, and sometimes you generate it in unexpected ways, don't you? And people love a bit of controversy and argument and so on.
Those stories around the game, the richness of them, I agree with you, Martyn, that it attracted probably more fans to that match, and yet there's the bit about how the media fuels that too. Yeah. So they grasp. I mean, Jake, it was extraordinary. There were pictures of Bradford in the Bradford riots that were on the back page of the Sydney Daily Telegraph, going, "This man, Leon Price, public enemy number one in Manly, right? Number one, would rather be there, the Bradford riots, than he would be on Bondi Beach."
Yeah. Actually, you've just given me an idea for a future podcast, and that is to go to Blackpool Beach with Leon Price to do a thing on Blackpool Beach.
Leon would love it. So,
I'm sure he would.
Last story on this. We were invited. The team was invited to the residence of the Australian High Commissioner in Sydney. Beautiful place overlooking the rocks and all this stuff. You can imagine it, Jake. And so we go there on the bus, and as we're getting off the bus, the media guys are there again to film it all, and it just so happened that Adrian Morley got off the bus in front of Liam Price. What was the headline the following day? English enforcer protecting Price from retribution. Yeah. It just so happened they're filing off the bus and he was in front of him.
Yeah.
I mean,
the Aussie media has got a great imagination, but it sells, doesn't it? That's the point.
It sure, and yet Great Britain won the game.
Yes, absolutely,
and that was a fantastic night and a fantastic event. And Stuart. It affected him very badly, because he won't mind me saying that he was carrying an injury going into that Test series. His mother had been extraordinarily ill, and he was showing great courage and fortitude by even being part of that team and setup. And as a very proud man, it took him a long time to get over that.
I always got that impression with Stuart. Yeah. I've never spoken to him about it, but it was, and but fortunately, hopefully, he did in the end.
He certainly did. Yeah. And I think him. By then, he joined the Wigan club, and I think over a year or two, he got his mojo back, and he was a real cultural leader in this club at that time, and was part of the transition at our club between Brian and then Michael Maguire, and Stuart was absolutely the golden thread between those two regimes.
Didn't you come to Wigan at the same time as Stuart in 2006 as the club doctor?
I came at the end of 2006, because it was midway through the season, so it was Easter of 2006 when Brian announced he was coming here.
And it was a relegation battle for Wigan that year, wasn't it? In fact, for much of the season, it looked as though Wigan would be relegated. They were in an absolutely unprecedented situation at the bottom of the Super League table, and as it turned out, they did escape relegation. But one of the fascinating things about that year that's worth considering, actually, is that the crowds for Wigan rose.
I was just going to say
substantially, because it was so unusual for Wigan fans to be watching a team that was in danger of relegation that the town rallied.
It did. So that galvanised the team without any question at all, and that was a really important bit, I understand, from the team. Managing to get out of that relegation battle. Of course, Stuart almost single-handedly led the troops forward. Would you know a guy called Stuart Duffy?
Oh yes, of course. Yeah,
great.
Used to be at Bradford. Yeah.
So he met Brian for a coffee, and he said to Brian, "Well, look, here's where we are." He said, between Bradford and Wigan. He said, "Wigan have recruited you as the head coach. Our star player, Stuart Fielding, Michael Withers the Ghost, he's on his way, as well. And he said, and you even want the doctor. So we all just had to sort of laugh a little bit around that because...
of course, by that time, Ian Lenigan had taken ownership of the club here, hadn't he, I think?
No.
Oh, had he not? When
2008.
Was it 2008 that he came on board? Right.
So it was still Morris and David Whelan.
Ah, I see, right, okay.
And so 2007 was a transition year for the Wigan Warriors. In 2006, the Catalan Dragons had just they'd come into the Super League.
Yes, and you were their first opponents.
And we were their first opponents, yet we were also their opponents in the Challenge Cup semi-final in 2007. And it was a great disappointment to everybody that Stacey Jones, he put in one of those masterclass performances, and the Catalan Dragons got to Wembley. Now, the significance of that, Jake, was that was the first year of the new Wembley.
It was, yes.
And I think we all, the team, the club, the board, and especially the fans, were looking forward to going to that new Wembley.
To play St Helens, of course.
To play St Helens, of course. Yeah. And it took us a long time to get over that, to be honest. You know, that was very hard, a very hard disappointment.
It's interesting you say that, because sometimes from the outside, Chris, it's difficult to appreciate how much impact a shock defeat can have on a club.
Massive.
You know, it really is.
It took... I'm fortunate enough to have a good memory, and I remember following that game. That was in late July, early August. There was a dreadful run where the team lost 3 or 4 games on the bounce, but then recovered, and that was the year that Wigan then went to Bradford away in the first game of the playoffs. Bradford were winning well until about the 60th minute. And then suddenly the game turned and Wigan won narrowly.
Was that the game where Wigan won 31-30?
Yes.
And there were 36 down, 30 points to 6 down.
Yeah, exactly.
With very little time to go. And
exactly.
Yeah.
Pat Richards was right to the fore in that game. And so that sort of started, I suppose, the Wigan revival, really.
I'll tell you a story about that game as well, Chris. There was a guy who I knew who worked for William Hill, the bookmakers. And William Hill, as they still do, offer odds as a game unfolds.
Sure,
you know.
Yeah.
So when it got to about 67 or 68 minutes in that game, and Wigan was still 24 points behind, this guy who was responsible for setting odds on rugby league games, he offered Bradford Bulls 100 to 1 on to win that game. So you'd have to risk £100 to win £1. And one punter in London apparently put £100,000 on Bradford to win the game, to win 1,000. Thinking of obviously it was a certain because a lot of big gamblers gamble on very short odds,
right?
You know, punts because they think they're certain to win. And this guy was a major gambler, risked £100,000 to win 1,000, and lost his money. And that's amazing. And it was that game, 31-30 to Wigan, that they got with a late drop goal at the end. And
extraordinary,
fantastic.
I think Pat dropped the drop.
Yes,
goal.
And a lot of the Wigan fans had started going home at half time.
Yeah.
That was the other interesting thing about it.
It was an amazing night.
Yeah.
And yet there was something around Leeds and Wigan at that time.
Yeah.
And I was still fortunate enough to be the national team doctor, and we often used to train in Leeds at Leeds Rugby Academy. And I used to think, why the heck do I always feel fed up when I'm leaving here? And it was because Wigan got to so many semi-finals, elimination semi-finals against Leeds, at Leeds, and Leeds were just too good for Wigan. And that then turned in 2010 when Michael came, and just that little bit of a catalyst that just changed things.
What did he bring? Because I mean, he was remarkably successful, wasn't he? He only was here for 2 years, but I think you won the league in his first year, and then I think the Challenge Cup in 2011.
Yeah.
And of course, he's coaching New South Wales this year, isn't he? So and he had a successful spell with New Zealand as their national coach. But people always said that he was an incredibly hard taskmaster.
He is,
and trained players, to almost within an inch of their lives in a way. I mean, that's exaggeration, obviously, but trained them to the ultimate. So that whatever happened in a game wasn't as bad as what was happening on the training pitch, I think.
He demanded the highest of standards from everybody. And that was absolutely at the root of everything that made him the success and makes him the success he is. Incredibly passionate. He made some tactical changes as well around defence that I think were successful at the time. But he instilled a sense of belief and an absolute sense of never say die in the players and the team. And that probably building on the great work that Brian had done, that was just a little bit, that last little turn of the dial that then meant the team could go to the next level. And of course we had some extraordinary players and so a great friend of mine, Martyn, he thrived in that environment on the field of play. And he scored the most superb try against St Helens in the Super League Grand Final in 2010. And you think, well, that's the level of, that's the standard that Michael not just wanted, he demanded, and that was from everybody, Martyn.
Well, I think he was the nearest in rugby league that I can think of to the great American football coach Vince Lombardi, who was the great man behind the Green Bay Packers in the 1960s.
Sure. Yeah,
and he had a lot of sayings that people repeated ad infinitum afterwards. But one of his major ones was that winning isn't everything; it's the only thing.
Yeah.
And I think Michael probably would have shared that that viewpoint.
Yeah, and he then leaving Wigan had enormous success, of course, at the South Sydney Rabbitohs.
Won the grand final, with the Burgess brothers.
Yeah, and I had the good fortune to work with South Sydney when they then played St Helens in the World Club Challenge. And again, an extraordinary night. And,
Gosh, it was, yes.
And
38-0, I think, wasn't it?
Michael knew me very well, and he knew that every Tuesday night I worked in the emergency department very late into the early hours of the morning. I remember one night, Jake, was there in the department, literally 2 a.m, and my little phone rings, and it's Michael. What the heck's he want? So he said, look, we're coming across, we're not bringing a doctor, I want you to be our doctor. And I said, okay, well that's great. So I was part of that setup, and again, those standards that he brought, that absolute, we have to win the game, and crikey, the team did very, very well. There was a guy called Isaac Luke, do you remember him?
Oh yes,
Bully they called him.
So I knew him a bit from the New Zealand setup, because I'd see him around and we'd say hello and hi. Anyway, at the end of the game, and of course Sydney had performed very, very well, there was a tradition where everybody drank a beer in the dressing room, but if you were a new person, you had to drink a beer in front of everybody. Now, Isaac Luke hands me this beer. Michael tried to rescue me and saying, the doc doesn't drink. I'll never forget what Isaac Luke said. He goes, he does now. so whether I liked it or not, Jake, I had to drink that beer down. And something else. It was so Sam Burgess, who. Sam and I get on very well for a number of reasons, but he was playing with Bath Rugby at the time.
He was then,
and he came to the game, and I can see him in the St Helens dressing room now. He sort of waved across to me. Anyway, you will know, Jake, the Rabbitohs, that they are quite big time with their fans and stuff, and you know, famous folk around. Anyway, Sam's got this bloke in tow with him, and he comes across to say hello to me, blah, blah, blah. And then he said to me, "Have you met Russell?" I went, oh. Crikey, it's Russell Crowe. I'm thinking, who are these guys?
Yeah, marvellous.
Absolutely amazing, you know, group of folk. And they there was another thing that sort of stuck in my mind about that game. There was like a bit of a pre-match meal at the hotel in St Helens by the motorway, I think. Called the Thistle or something. Anyway, we sort of turn up there, and these guys were such big timers that they'd paid for the restaurant to be closed, so that it was exclusive use of the restaurant for the ticket. Fine, okay, and because we sort of then come out, there's a sea of people who'd wanted to go in there, and as you might have expected, you know, in a 5-star hotel for their meal, evening meal at 6 o'clock, they couldn't come in because restaurant closed. These guys come out, and there were these St Helens fans in the corner, and they saw me, and they looked across. They go, "It's typical." They go, "It's typical. That Wigan lot, that doctor, he'd do anything to get one over St Helens." I'm thinking, the doctor?
Yeah. Well, you did in the end, didn't you? I mean, they did beat them easily.
Anyway, what a great night it was. Yeah.
Did Russell Crowe, nice firm handshake, I'd imagine?
Very much so.
Yeah.
And Jake, what a voice.
Yeah. That's
absolutely.
Right. Well, he did all the promotional work on the video that they had for the fans in Las Vegas, so... You know, he's obviously got a huge stake in the game and wants to see it succeed. So
great. What a great experience to meet him. But it was just the fact it was so matter of fact to these guys, and there were lots of other famous people around, and I weren't sure who they were yet. Obviously, very famous.